on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the courage to grieve. Sometimes the intensity of our emotions is so great that we get terrified by them and try to avoid them at all costs because we're afraid of getting lost in them. And the problem with that is that if we don't allow those emotions to process through, then the energy of that gets stuck and it persists in our body and in our emotions. So we're going to talk about the courage to grieve and how we can allow our hearts to heal by invoking that courage. So before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any tension, any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're talking about the courage to grieve. Just on a personal note, I have been working for weeks on healing my heart around love and being able to receive love, being able to experience love on a deeper level, being able to give love. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, sweetheart. So I've been working on this for weeks, old wounds around being like different dimensions. It's not that I haven't worked on this before in my life. I think we all have themes in our lives that recur. I call it the upward spiral, the evolutionary spiral, where it looks like the same issues just recur over and over. But the thing is that when they do, we're addressing them from a different place where it's an evolutionary cycle. So there are different dimensions of these issues that we revisit at different stages of our lives. Anyway, I've been working on issues around love and being lovable and receiving love and being worthy and all of that stuff that, probably as teenagers, we never imagined we would be addressing at the later stages of our lives, right? But anyway, welcome. Darlene is here from Michigan. Great to have you joining us, Darlene. Welcome. So anyway, yesterday I was watching a TV series called From Scratch, which is just very, very sweet, lovely. And there was, here's a spoiler alert, there was a death that was very um, bittersweet, tragic. And it reminded me, it took me back to seeing my dad through his passing when he was in hospice at home. And the grief and the very mixed feelings, very, very mixed feelings in my case, but the grief of that loss. And this is another one of those things that I think we process in cycles, that we don't just get to, I at least in my life, I haven't gotten to just grieve once and done, and that's it, that's all. But what I notice about grief is that it comes in waves. The sorrow comes in waves. And our cultural predisposition, I think, is to try and push away the feelings. I'm not gonna feel that right now. I'm not gonna feel that at all, maybe. We just tamp it down, we shunt it away into some kind of dark corner, we close the door, lock it, throw away the key. The thing is that just because we lock it up someplace in a deep, deep, dark corner doesn't mean it's gone. And what I see in the transformational and healing work that I do is that the emotions and circumstances that we don't process end up anchoring themselves oftentimes in our bodies and oftentimes in physical conditions over time, and oftentimes in outward behaviors, even before the physical conditions. So, and our emotional bodies, because emotion really truly is energy. It has a frequency. And when we bottle it up, it gets compressed and it can wreak havoc. So what we want to be able to do is to process those emotions. And the thing about grief and some other pretty intense emotions is that they're so intense that we are afraid of them, that we're afraid we'll get lost in them, that they will consume us, that they will overtake us, that we'll lose ourselves. And it's possible. It's possible that we can. And if we allow ourselves to feel the grief when we feel it, it has to dissipate. It will dissipate. And I don't mean wallowing. So here's a distinction, and it's a little challenging of a distinction, I guess. But the distinction is to feel the feelings, to feel the emotion, to cry and wail if you need to, and to not need to attach to a story around the emotion. Good morning, Dido. Welcome. So good to have you joining us this morning. So we often will say, how are you feeling? Or why do you feel that way? And what happens when we do that sort of, why do we feel that way, is we feel compelled to make a story up, or we move into our heads and out of the experience. And what I can tell you is that last night, this show allowed me to access deep, deep grief for so many losses. We can't live this life without experiencing loss, right? But what this work that I've been doing over the past probably month at least is work to open my heart. And what I experienced last night was just this deep grieving. And I literally felt the pain in my heart. And in feeling that pain, what I believe is that my heart was opening. It was like cracking open, where it had kind of become calcified, trying to weather and brace against the grief, to protect myself from it, to defend myself from potentially becoming overwhelmed and consumed by it. And it's not that I haven't grieved, I have, but there was an even deeper level of that contained pain that had closed my heart off, or some portion of my heart off, from the experience of being able to love more deeply. And so, yes, I recognize that we may be fearful of the intensity of our emotions. And yet, when we can cultivate the courage to allow the movement of that energy, there's a sense of freedom, of liberation, of vitality. We're actually allowing life to move through us more fluidly. We're actually allowing ourselves to experience life more completely. And so, yeah, I mean, it was wild. There was a physical pain in my heart. And apparently there is a broken heart syndrome, where there really is such a thing, that our emotion impacts our physical heart. And that's why it's so important to allow the release of that energy, the tears, the sadness. It is an energetic release. We are energetic beings. And science is validating that more and more and more. And so it's by curating our energies that we curate our health. And a big part of that energy is emotional. So, how do we cultivate the courage to experience those emotions? I mean, some of us have experienced depression, myself included, that is so deep that it can be terrifying to imagine going back to that depth of darkness again. And yet the valleys, the hills and valleys of our emotions are the essence of life to such a great degree. Rosalind says, bringing to the surface to look at it as it was happening. You were witnessing it happen as you were experiencing it. Exactly. Exactly. Bringing it to the surface, allowing it to arise, being present to it. And what happens is that as we allow it to arise, it dissipates. It can't not dissipate. So as we experience it, as we allow it to move, it moves and it dissipates, even though we think we may be stuck there for forever. I'll tell you what helps us to stick there forever, what prolongs it, what protracts it, what perverts it, the expression of these emotions, is the stories that we make about them. So judging ourselves for experiencing the emotion, telling ourselves that we're going to be strong, for example, as if experiencing emotion is weakness. That's what our culture conditions us to a great degree. That you're too emotional, you're too sensitive. Too emotional, too sensitive for what? You know, the emotion is a way that we connect with our world. It's a dynamic communication, actually. Rosalind says, transmuting, is that what changed the energy? Not sure what that word transmuting means. Yes, so transmuting means transforming something from one thing into something else. And so energy is energy, and it occurs at different frequencies. And emotions occur at different frequencies. When we can allow the movement of that energy, allow the movement of that frequency to pass through, then it becomes dissolved or transmuted into something else. The frequency changes. And we can't, it's my experience anyway, is that we can't sustain an emotion or even a thought. Some people have trained themselves into being able to have that level of concentrated focus, but generally we can't sustain an emotion or a thought indefinitely. It changes. And so even if we have waves of sorrow, they're waves. They're not constant. And oftentimes what we do is we create and recreate the pain and the sorrow and the anguish by the stories that we tell ourselves, by the stories about, I'm never going to see you again, and maybe things that we regret, or replaying painful scenarios over and over and over so that we regenerate the same painful pattern again and again. And it's so interesting to me that culturally we have a bias toward the negative, where we amplify the pain. We like worry. We look at a scenario, we extrapolate from our interpretation of a given scenario, and we make up stories and project them into the future and say that's how it's going to be. So I was talking with a client yesterday about a situation where a challenging situation that they're confronting in their lives, and they have projected a future where it's hopeless, pretty much, where they've determined this is the way it is, that's the truth, that's actually the fact going forward. They're projecting into the future, they're fortune telling, and they're treating that future as if it is fact. And it may be that that future is likely. You know, we try to predict the future based on what we know, and we project it forward, right? Well, what we're doing when we do that is we're taking the past And we're putting it in front of us, so we get to live into the past. And the thing is that it's fantasy. It may be probable fantasy, but it's fantasy. And the truth is that we don't know what the future is going to bring. In any moment, there can be disruptive change for the positive, even. It doesn't have to be disruptive change for the negative. And yet we project all the negative into the future so we can prepare, right? And it's all about the stories we tell. So what we're talking about is the stories we tell about our emotions, like that they're scary, or that we'll be consumed by them, or we'll never get out from under them. I know when I was going through depression, I had lots and lots of stories about myself, about the world, about how hopeless it was, about how meaningless it was. And it was the stories that perpetuated the emotion. If we can allow ourselves to detach from our stories and have the courage to feel the feelings, to allow ourselves and our hearts to break so that they can break open. It takes courage. It takes courage to choose life, right? When the emotions are a part, are an essential part of life. That energy, allowing that energy to move through, that's life. Love too, the bliss, the joy, allowing those emotions to flow through, that's life. Rosalind says using the present to project into the future rather than using the past to replay old stories. I love that you're not projecting the past into the future, Rosalind. And I invite us to look at, instead of projecting the present into the future, inviting the future to us, inviting the future to call us forward rather than projecting anything. Allowing ourselves to be pulled into the future, allowing ourselves to be called forward. And that takes a lot of mental and emotional machination, because we're so oriented toward taking our past and putting it in, putting it in front of us and walking into that. So how do we allow ourselves to be called into the future? This is part of letting our hearts crack open so that we can open ourselves to love and to life and to whatever that call is of our hearts calling us forward. So it's kind of stepping into the dearest, sweetest dreams that we have, that our heart is calling us into, to be receiving the invitation of the future. I wonder if you can feel into that. So Rosalind says intimacy. If I want more of that, how does one feel those feelings? Feeling those emotions, not waiting for the conditions to feel them. That's the ticket. That's exactly the ticket. In any moment, we can, it's a little warm here. In any moment, we can create and generate any feelings. We do this all the time. We do it with worry. We're pretty practiced at that. What if we can, instead of longing for something we don't have, because longing is defined by the not having. How about if we experience the having of it? Experiencing the joy of that intimacy. Because when we do that, this is kind of calling us into the future. When we do that, we're magnetizing that opportunity that is in resonance with those feelings of intimacy, for example. So by allowing ourselves to bring alive the emotion, the desired emotion, that feeling of love, that feeling of safety, that feeling of being held, of being cherished, of cherishing, of connection, of communion with someone, for example, or with life itself, we can experience those feelings without the conditions. And that experience becomes a magnet for the conditions. It's exactly the opposite of how we have been taught things work, kind of, right? Things exist first in an energetic field. And then they slow down from that high energy, energetic field, then they slow down into material form. And so the courage to experience emotion, to have an open heart, to break ourselves open is the courage of life, the courage to actually live life, to experience life, to create life. And as we project our emotions, experience the energy of those emotions, we can draw our future to us. We can be drawn into our future. And it's all through the courage of being willing to experience emotion. So the courage to grieve, the courage to feel. So many of us are taught that it's just easier to go through life, just cut off the feelings and just do. But that's cutting us off from life itself. And so let's cultivate that courage. That's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's a deep, deep, deep pleasure and privilege to share these morning musings on what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.